Lesson 10.2, Estimating Sums and Differences of Mixed Numbers. If you look at the vocabulary in just the title of this lesson, we have estimating, so we know that we're going to be rounding. We have sums, which means we'll be adding, and differences, which means we'll be subtracting. So these are all things that we've already done. Just now, instead of just regular fractions, we're looking at mixed numbers. So if you look at the board right now, it shows one way and a second way. So you're going to learn two different ways to estimate sums and differences of mixed numbers. Let's look at the first way first. That sounds weird. Alright, the first way. Make a mixed number line and see which whole number it is closest to. So as you can see right here, if our example of 3 1/4, we draw a number line, we plot the point right here we have 3 and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's 3 1/4 is right here. It's this close to 3 and that far from 4. So you can see the smallest arrow tells us which number it's closest to. So we're going to round 3 1/4 to 3. One thing to remember, and in this chapter, or at least this lesson, we are rounding to the nearest whole number. Before we were looking at either 0, 1/2, or 1. Now we're looking for the nearest whole number. So that's going to be a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4, and so on. Now this is what a traditional number line would look like, but if you notice, the number line's this big. We're only using this part of it. And so another suggestion that you could do is only make that part of the number line. Look what I did on the line below it. I started here with 3 and ended over here with 4. So I still made the number line the same size, but instead of having all of those little marks that were unnecessary, I only made my fourths, my 3 1/4, 3 2/4, 3 3/4, and then my whole going back to 4. So just like I did up here, I plotted a point at 3 1/4 and then drew a line to 3 and a line to 4. And you can see it's easy to see here that the line to 3 is much shorter. So again, we're going to round 3 1/4 to 3. A second example of that is what else we'll have to do. This looks like we're using a subtraction sign, so we're estimating the difference. 2 6/7 minus 1 3/4. So I draw my line. I have my whole number of 2 and 3. Because I know that 2 6/7 is going to be more than 2, so I have to have 2 as my bottom number. The next whole number is 3, so 3 is my top number. I draw my line, so I have 1/7, 2/7, 3/7, 4/7, 5/7, 6/7, and then I get to my whole, which would be 7/7, and I put 3. I plot my point at 2 6/7, and look how I don't even have to draw this other line. It's so close to the 3. I'm going to round the 2 6/7 to 3. But notice, since I had two separate numbers, I had to draw two separate number lines, right? So I drew my other one in blue. It was 1 3/4, so I have 1 and 2 as my whole numbers. I plot my fourths, 1 1/4, 1 2/4, 1 3/4. That would be 1 4/4, which we know is also 2. Since my number was 1 3/4, I plot my point right there. That's 1, 2, 3/4. So 1 3/4. And look how close it is to 2. Again, I'm not even drawing my other line because I know there's no way it could be that. So I know that that's going to round up to 2. So 1 3/4 rounds to 2. So my answer looks like this. 3 minus 2 equals 1. And that's the first way. Let's look at the second way. Use 1/2 as a benchmark fraction to round to the nearest whole number. Once again, rounding to the nearest whole number. Let's look at the example of 3 1/4. This is what we're going to do. We're going to divide the denominator by 2. And again, dividing by 2 is finding half of it. So when I said up here that we're using 1/2 as a benchmark, to find that we have to divide by 2. So you divide the denominator by 2 And if the numerator is greater than your quotient, you round up. If the numerator is less than your quotient, you round down. So let's take our example. 3 1/4. I take my denominator and I divide it by 2. So 4 divided by 2, and I get an answer of 2. Since my numerator is less than my quotient is 2, my numerator was 1. Pause the video and find out what you think I'm going to do. Right, you round to 3. I had 3 1/4 because my numerator was less than my quotient. I have to round it down to 3. Let's look at another example down here. 9 1/8 minus 6 5/6. I take my denominator